I now give the floor to the delegation of National Association of Friendship Centers.
Global de Juventud Indígena.
Hi, we're also the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time to speak on behalf of the Indigenous youth who have gathered at the Permanent Forum. My name is Avery Dockstader. I'm from Walpole Island First Nations. I'm the president of the Indigenous Youth Council for the National Association of Friendship Centers. My colleagues and I wish to uplift the voices of our fellow youth who are focused on prioritizing the 2030 development agenda. One of the goals is to take urgent action to combat the impact of climate change. This agenda item is important to the goals of the Indigenous youth because it addresses the future of Indigenous peoples and their survival. The severity of the current climate crisis has led many Indigenous youth to contemplate whether or not they should continue their family lines or have future generations suffer in their effort of survival. Colonizers have created systems that endorse the violent removal and disregard of territorial presence of Indigenous communities. This violence affects the ability of Indigenous peoples to maintain and conserve their lands, and it increases the risk for climate change conditions to worsen. We cannot achieve the strategic development goals without recognition and incorporation of Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. Nature-based solutions put forward by the governments around the world are ultimately extractive and will only lead to the further destruction of not just Indigenous communities, but to humankind itself. The notion of being separate from the earth and its use as a resource rather than being viewed as a relative is detrimental. The violence perpetrated against Mother Earth is reflected in the violence states direct against Indigenous peoples. If the state is willing to hurt Mother Earth, they are willing to hurt the very people they are supposed to be protecting. With this in mind, I'd like to share the mic with Spencer James from the Coastal Chumash Band to share our recommendations.
Our priorities are for the UN member states to reaffirm the rights addressed in Article 25 and 26 of UNDRIP and enforce these rights for the protection of Indigenous peoples and territorial rights. We also wish to recognize the importance of having the youth voice at a global level with the demand that there will be a permanent space at the table of priorities of youth. We recommend that the Permanent Forum give Indigenous youth consideration for the appointment of the Secretariat. We also would like to suggest that the next decadal theme be the International Decade of Indigenous Youth. We want to reiterate the call made by the Permanent Forum in paragraph 96 in the report of the 20th session of UNPFII to address the mental health consequences of the pandemic and the call for investments and preparations for mental and behavioral health interventions that are culturally adapted. Gakinalan for your time and consideration.
Invito a la